Hey, Dice Camera Action friends, this is your friend Sage of Sorcery, here with episode 6 of the Waffle Press. Boom. Okay, actually, this isn't a Waffle Press, this is a George Foreman, but, one can only have too many waffles before, it starts adding on, so maybe sometimes a grilled steak would be better. I don't know, you tell me. Anyway, I am excited to be here with you tonight. We are going to be talking about Dice Camera Action, episode 90, which was the end of season I don't know, season 2, season 3, whatever, it doesn't make a difference to me. It is the end of the season, so we are really excited to move forward here and talk to you about my take on episode 90, what I thought we were going to get, what we actually got, and then also where I think we're heading for the next season. Maybe a little bit of a shorter episode today because we don't have as much lore to cover. There wasn't too much in the plot of Dice Camera Action that stirred any lore questions for me. But as always, if you are in the chat, feel free to go ahead and pop in, say hi there and hello. Had a really fun time talking to Magikarp in the last episode. Stay sharp, Magikarp. So that was fun. That was the first time I had a streamer pop in and start asking me questions. So I really enjoyed that. So anybody who wants to pop in and ask a question, feel free to ask a question at any point. I'll probably get to it right away, where I may wait a sec, but I'd love to have you. So go ahead and pop in, and that'll be great. Also, it may be a shorter episode because my brother is actually here to play a little two-man D&D, which is kind of interesting because we have all these campaigns that we're part of. I have a few friends that I play with on a regular basis. I have a church group that I started, but I've been playing with my brothers since I was, knee-high to my father's kilt. And so that's interesting. So anyway, he's here to play tonight. And so that'll be fun. So we may do a little short episode, or we may go for the full hour. I don't know. Maybe we'll even go for an hour and 10. Although if that happens, he'll probably come up here. So you may hear people tromping around at some point. You may also hear my brother's bebe. Speaking of bebes, you may hear my brother's baby cry. So that'll be funny. But anyway, or an interruption, whatever. But yeah, so let's go ahead and jump in and start talking about Dice Camera Action episode 90. So I wonder, did you guys get what you wanted? Is it what we thought would happen? We had a confrontation with the awful crew and the waffle crew. I'm not sure that this is how I thought it would play out. I was predicting that maybe we would jump ahead a little bit and revisit the awful crew multiple times. Now that window is certainly open because, as we all know, Evil Paulton survived, and so because of that, the door's open, right? Which is great for Chris, because whatever plans Chris had for the awful crew, or whatever plans he may have adjusted for the awful crew, we know that now he has a window open for him to be able to do any number of things. So this will be interesting. I don't know where he's going to go with Evil Paulton being alive. I tell you what I think may happen. I've spoken about this before, so if you've watched my previous videos, you've heard me talk about this before, but I do think that there is the possibility that that we'll get more clones. The Hags have more material now, right? Because they made the deal for the scroll. So the Hags have more material now. The deal with the Hag Bebe is still on the table. Strix may not be taking it now, and with what I suspect is going to be happening in the next season, we may not be anywhere near where the Hags would have contacts, although I'm sure the Sohn sisters are kind of a big deal. If they can get the true names of Shemeshka and Mr. Fox, then who knows? Maybe they will reach across the plains. And when we get into the segment of Down the Rabbit Hole, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that. So anyway, my mind is kind of buzzing with ideas. There's lots for us to talk about, and I'm excited to be here. So let's jump into talking about episode 90 a little bit. So we started out with Diath getting the glasses back from the little girl who's supposedly evil. Now, that's an interesting concept, the idea of an evil child. I'd be really curious to hear the rest of you guys sound off about, do you think there is such a thing as an evil child? I know that's kind of a fantasy concept that's really popular in fantasy literature. You've got Damien, the Antichrist, who is evil from the get-go, right? And then there are, the haggling that I think I talked to you guys about in previous streams. And if not, maybe I'll address that a little bit later. But, there's the idea that the innocence of childhood can be corrupted. Depending on your theological beliefs, you might be one of those people that believes that, some children might be spirits who were evil, before they were born. So who knows? or whatnot. I don't know. I'm not sure. To be honest with you, I don't really believe that there is such a thing as an evil child per se. I don't think God makes evil children. So that's a personal belief of mine. But that also being said, I don't believe that I do believe that a child can be corrupted quite easily and can be turned to evil. I mean, obviously that happens. We have child murderers and things like that, and other things like that. But I do believe it's a corruption, and I think most psychologists, go back and forth on the debate of nurture nature, right? But that being said, I think that's an area where nurture has a lot more to do with it than nature. I was a teacher. For those of you who don't know, I taught in the classroom, in my own classroom, for 12 years, long-term sub for 5, so 17 years. 17 years in the classroom you're looking at here of experience. And I ran into a lot of children who had been warped, who had been twisted, who had been abused, who had suffered. But I have to tell you, I don't know that I ever felt like I ran into an evil child. I mean, some that had been warped and corrupted to the point where they did evil things, but I always got the feeling, interacting with them, that it was the result of damage, that I could trace their behaviors all had a pathology to them. You can trace it back, and 15, 17 years in the classroom, whatever, you begin to see the same kid, over and over again, or rather the same difficulties begin to present themselves. So it's worth talking about. It's worth thinking about. Now, in terms of fantasy literature, in terms of Dungeons and Dragons, we can suspend disbelief, of course, and jump right into the idea that, of course, there's an evil child. So I don't know. There's that whole thing is on the table. It's an interesting thing to think about. The fact that they found a child. I don't know if I were Chris. Chris is a pretty big advocate for diversity, and so I imagine he's an advocate for many things. He's also I think he's a very strong progressive liberal. You can tell from his posts. So that being said, it's an interesting scenario overall to consider. But I don't think I think Chris is probably a very big child advocate too. By the way, he defended, after the stupid kid comment. So we'll jump into the stupid kid comment. So let's jump into what works and what irks, okay? So we start off with this child stealing the glasses, and I got to tell you, I was really happy that Diath got the glasses back. That just irritated me. I was like, no, don't, man, we gotta chase down the glasses. And the reason it irks is because I want to jump into meetings with Shemeshka and Mr. Fox. I don't want anything to delay that. I don't want the hags to delay that. I don't want the little girl to delay that. The little girl will come back. I'm sure she'll come back. The idea of an evil child is too compelling. So it'll be interesting to see where we go from here in terms of not only that little girl, but the hags, Shemeshka, Mr. Fox. But I want the glasses. I want him to have what he needs. I want the party, the Waffle Crew, I'm just thinking about Diath, to have what they need. So I was glad that Diath chased her down. And it's funny, too, because, when Jared said, he's like, and I'm way faster than she is, it was funny listening to Jared justify that. And the reason being because we've all been in that position, right? Where we think something is just within our grasp, and the dungeon master just snatches it out from under us, that the rug is snatched out from under us. And I think we've all been there before, and it makes me giggle. So I'm watching Jared be like, but he got it, and so he does get the glasses. Gives the little girl. Very nicely done, Nate. In terms of game mechanics, he manages to charm or suggestion the kid. Kid takes off. He's got the glasses, and everybody walks away from the situation fairly happy, including Mr. Turtle. And we'll talk about Mr. Turtle in a second. It was interesting listening to Diath and Paulton say, stupid kid. The kid should have disadvantage because the kid is a kid. I thought they raised a really interesting question. So, the idea of age and the idea of how age affects your statistics is something that I feel like is worth a page or two, maybe in the player's handbook, in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Now, particularly because there were so many effects in 2nd edition, especially once the open gaming license happened in 3rd edition, that affected people's age. Now in 2nd, and maybe this is also in 3rd, I don't quite remember, But in the previous editions of the game, there were effects that would happen if you were to become venerable. There were these different age categories for players, and I think DMs could allow you to start, according to the player's handbook, at a different age. If you wanted to play a kid, your wisdom and your wisdom might be lower, because you haven't had life experience. But if you wanted to play an old man, your intelligence and your wisdom would be higher. Your constitution, your dexterity and strength might be lower. And so if a player got aged unnaturally by a spell, like Steal the Years or something like that, then it was the kind of situation where you could really apply those penalties immediately, right? So it's an interesting theory to think about. The idea behind what does that do? I'm afraid, and maybe there's a chart in the 5th edition book. I've looked through the 5th edition. I haven't played 5th edition yet. But I've looked through the 5th edition books a lot. I've read them for fun on my lunch break, and at other times in Barnes & Noble. And thank you, Barnes & Noble. We appreciate you letting us leaf through Dungeons & Dragons books that we're not ready to buy yet. I will buy them. I think they're great books. They give, even if I'm not ready to play 5th edition yet, because I haven't finished playing all the stuff I want to play from 4th, I do enjoy reading the books, so it's enjoyable. Anyway, that being said, I don't know in 4th edition, in this political era and day and age where people are just so vehemently defending any kind of diversity whatsoever and just looking for the slightest bit of people stepping a foot out of line so they can cry racist or so they can cry ageist or sexist or whatever. I think all of America is sick of it, and I think. Even as I'm someone who works in student advocacy, and I will tell you that I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the watchdog. I'm sick of the police, which is something that irritates me. So I don't know that ever became an issue or would become an issue in 4th or 5th edition, because it's not in vogue to think that someone who's older might be. You don't know someone who's older is physically weaker. You don't know that. You're judgmental. Okay. Sorry. Forgive me for my ageist comment. But I thought it was fascinating. Now, I will also tell you it's fascinating because I just started a character who is an old man. He's 62, and his name is Dr. Alistair Arcave, and he's been around the mill. He was a practicing wizard, got punished by the gods, had his magic stolen, so he had high intelligence. He picked up psionics. So he is an interesting character. I really enjoy playing him. I wrote out his backstory, and it was very fun. I was writing out pages of you're not pages. I was writing out about a page of details in my campaign world of places where he had burned his bridges. He had a wizard master and he was summoning a demon trying to find forbidden lore, and he got his master killed, and then he had to run into the night. And so he's got this long history, and he used to know up to 5th level magic, and now he had to start over again at a college of psionics because the gods punished him, right? So I love this idea of age and how it affects your ability scores, and it would be interesting, but I haven't found anything in 4th edition, so maybe you know of something. If you do, leave a comment, write it in. So back to episode 90, Diathan Paulson said, "Stupid kid, he should get disadvantage." I don't think that's unreasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable, the idea that a child whose immune system is weaker, who is not as physically, mentally, or emotionally formidable yet, should have disadvantage on a saving throw. I was reading one of the Forgotten Realms books. It was The Symbol's Gift, and I should have brought it up, but it just occurred to me, right? The Symbol's Gift, and it's really fun because you wander around with 2 of the Chosen of Mystra. You wander around with Illustrial, the High Lady of Silvermoon at the time, and the Symbol, or the Queen of Aglarond. And so you wander around, and they are dealing with a child. And her name is Elasra, the Symbol. She has the need to deal with a kid who's in her hair, and a kid who's been traumatized. So she casts a lullaby cantrip, and Illustrial comes in and says, "Well, how long did you think that was going to last?" And Elasra says, "Well, I cast it on a child, so I figured it would last a while." And Selene was like, "The magic's not strong enough, but you obviously haven't spent enough time dealing with children." So anyway, I thought that was an interesting interlude, and it certainly brings up interesting questions. How should magic affect a child? I don't think disadvantage would have been a bad thing. Then again, that little girl's from the streets, so maybe she's seen things. I don't know. So maybe she thug. I'm not sure. Maybe she should get advantage because of the hard life that she's lived. So I don't know. I don't know. But it is something that I think is interesting. I'd love to see some charts and tables on it. Anyway, that being said, so Diath and Paulton said, kids are stupid. Honestly, Chris took them to task. I didn't like that. But here's the deal. I don't think any of the 4 people or 5 people in that game on that show actually have children. I've got 3 of them, and it didn't offend me. The fact that they think that kids are stupid. I don't think any of the 4 of them, the way that their lives are structured, are really built for children. And so, if they feel like kids are stupid, then okay, that's okay. That doesn't bother me. But it irks me to see them get corrected. And Chris said, well, hey, I've known 8-year-olds that could outsmart me. And Really? So I was like, we don't need, it was a flippant comment. But then again, Chris is the moderator too. He has to help set the tone of the game. That is part of the job of the Dungeon Master. So that being said, I don't know. It's an interesting circumstance overall. I wouldn't have done it. I certainly don't think that I would have taken them to task in front of the audience, us. It irked me. It probably irked other people. I don't know. There are huge child advocates out there who may feel differently. But it's the kind of thing I might have taken behind closed doors. So I don't know. I just don't feel like we have to spew sunshine 24 hours a day. And I don't feel like, number one, because I don't feel like that's genuine. We can be polite and we can be respectful. But I don't think that means we have to spew sunshine or ignore an elephant in the room. I feel like that is intellectually dishonest and disingenuous. I don't know. It's an interesting concept. If they think that kids are dumb, that's okay. I'd rather they not be parents, And if it's just a flippant joke, that's okay too. I thought it was funny, They do feel like she's a stupid kid. So anyway, I think we need to be careful not to take ourselves too seriously, particularly when we're freaking playing Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, can we not take ourselves so seriously? So anyway, that situation kind of irked. But moving on, the situation that worked, I really liked it. I know you're going to think I'm dumb. Some of you have probably already tuned off anyway because I just went on a tirade about oversensitivity. But I really liked when Strix hugged the turtle. I was like, and maybe that didn't work for some of you. Everybody noticed it. Diath noticed it because he said Strix doesn't do that. Although Strix did get to the point, I remember in Barovia with Evelyn where she hugged her. It was a big deal. And I remember that it was a big deal, and Evelyn was like afraid to break the spell. She was like, oh, I love you. She wanted to say so much more. But she was afraid to, I guess break the spell or whatever. So interesting scenario. But that being said, I did think that it was really a sweet human moment. And I will tell you why. It's realistic. Strix has been really traumatized. A lot of, and she said it, but a lot of this is her fault. I mean, it really is. There are a lot of the events that we're dealing with here that have been caused by the choices or mistakes that she's made or the spells that she's cast. And so, and it was funny because Omen and Chris were agreeing it is your fault, and I was laughing. But I think that's traumatic for someone like Strix, who, 50 years alone in Barovia. By the way, I want to see that novel. I want to see some fiction about 50 years alone in Barovia. I'd love it if Holly would write a short story. I'd buy it, Even if I didn't think it was good enough, I'd buy it to support Holly. So that would be great. But a lot happened in those 50 years, And I wonder if Holly has written up anything for Chris about those 50 years. But the trauma of the moment means that she needed a hug. And guys, that's a real human moment. It really is. Speaking of children, it triggered a memory in me, and not an altogether unpleasant memory. So when I was in the hospital at one point, my son had a heart transplant. And we lived in the hospital on and off for about 2 years until he got to the point where he went into heart failure. And when we were in the hospital, there was a child in the bed next to my son, and he coded. And if you've ever seen anybody code in real life, it's frightening, okay? Their heart stops, and it's checkout time, okay? So they worked feverishly to bring this little boy back, and it was an interesting circumstance overall, because my son was not awake yet, not coming out of surgery, and we were watching this other family for whom, given our son's circumstances, we were extremely sympathetic. And it was really interesting because Okay, you're going to think I'm a lunatic here. But it was interesting because we stepped outside of the room, and I ran into the grandmother in the hallway, and she was in tears. And my wife and I we were in tears, watching this kid code, being traumatized, watching our child come out of yet another heart surgery. And we were in tears. And I found this grandmother. I bumped into her in the hallway, and I said, "Can I give you a hug, please?" I don't know this woman from Adam, okay? She's a complete stranger to me. But the universality of that experience of needing to reach out to another human being when you're in trauma and seek comfort, to seek physical affection, it is really real. And so, and Holly, I mean, she talks about the trauma of her life all the time, having come from an abusive home. And so she's not afraid to talk about those things. And given that situation, it's really interesting. So I liked it. I thought it was a really great human moment. And then you have the turtle. I mean, who doesn't want to hug a turtle? Okay, I want to hug a turtle. Okay, one of those little squirrels, whatever you want to call them. So it's a real interesting scenario. I liked it. I thought it was a beautiful human moment. And I thought it was cool. So I thought that worked. I thought, way to go, Holly. It's things like that, and it's touches like that on the Dice Camera Action Show that really make the characters not only come alive, but they make us care about the characters. And that is not something that you can underestimate, because it's difficult when you don't see human moments from the characters to think of them as human and not a block of stats, particularly on a streaming show. Now, the interesting thing is, Dungeons and Dragons streaming is a fairly new occurrence. The professionalizing of Dungeons and Dragons streams is new. This is a recent explosion in just really the last 5 years. And so, that being said, we've got all of these shows out here, and shows like mine and shows like these, they're kind of landmarks in a way, because D&D is it's exploding, and it's not mainstream yet, but it's more mainstream than it's ever been. And so, that being said, those human moments with the characters is what's going to make watching D&D streams not only invest us in the characters, but rewarding. And it's going to make us feel like we're in a story. Nobody really wants to sit and watch just a bunch of combat. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people out there who want to do that. People who might want to just sit and watch a Warhammer game or something like that. But what I am saying is that that's not mainstream. And I don't think that audience is ever going to be huge. But everybody likes movies. Almost everybody. Humans like movies, So that being said, I feel like the more... the idea of what a really great live streaming D&D show is evolving. We got a lot of different shows out there. I just started watching Sirens of the Realms. We've got Trapped in the Birdcage. Critical Role's been on for years. So the idea of what is a good streaming D&D show is evolving. And I don't think any of us should be surprised to see that manuals come out on it, on how to do it. A guide from Wizards of the Coast on how to make a good streaming. And Dice Camera Action, it is going to go down in history as one of the landmark shows that developed the entire genre. And it's human moments like Strix hugging the turtle that are going to make it seem, they're going to become, examples that professors might teach. Intelligent professors, unlike that one who just from Stanford decried D&D as a white misogynist patriarchy system inducer. Anyway, that frosts my cookies like I can't even tell you, and we may get into that at the end if we have time. Let's go back to the episode. So, other things that irked, okay? The pacing of the episode irked. I was in chat, and I said, not necessarily to be negative, but I said 25 minutes in, I said, okay, 25 minutes in, and we're spending 5 minutes on buying meat pies and worrying about feeding imaginary owl bears. And I'm like, this is irking me, because 25 minutes in, I started to realize the likelihood that we were going to get Evelyn's resurrection was shrinking and shrinking and shrinking the more time we spent on frippery. Not beautiful human moments, which, frankly, we all want to watch the Waffle Crew have these good moments. But buying a meat pie, I don't need a description of how everybody eats their meat pie or that Waffles is getting one. We are waiting with bated breath to see how Evelyn's resurrection goes. There's a contract between the viewer and between whoever is doing the show that we saw, like with Lost. The contract between the viewer and the actors or the producers of the show has to be honored, or you piss off the members of the show, right? Or you piss off the audience. You piss off the audience, they leave your show, and that's what happens. None of us are going to leave Dice Camera Action. Not only do we love the people involved, but we love the story and we're attached to the characters. But look at what happened with Lost, you know? We wanted an explanation for a lot of the crap that was going on the island, and we didn't get it. What we got for a lot of concrete mysteries was kind of an ephemeral Buddhist perspective on good and evil without much scientific explanation. It had the potential to be so interesting. When we figured out on Lost, spoilers on Lost, the show, that we could move the island, okay, and things like that. When we figured out on Lost that the black smoke had been human, like, how did that happen, you know? I don't care if there's mysticism involved, but for heaven's sakes, give us an origin. And so when we didn't, the pacing irritated me on this episode. And granted, you know, it's hard. And it's not like Chris wasn't cognizant of it. He was trying, you know, at different moments to move things along, but we dilly-dallied too much in the beginning, and I think that's why we didn't get to the resurrection, which, you know, we can get into that in a bit. But the pacing irked me. I didn't get my resurrection. I'm a little bummed about that because we all want to know what Evelyn's going to do. She doesn't have to come back. It's her choice. The resurrection isn't a mandated spell. And you also have people like the elves in the history of D&D who have believed that disturbing the dead is an offense, particularly against Sehanin Munbo, right? The elves believe that you don't talk about the dead, you don't mess with the dead, you don't cast spells to interact with the dead, but whatever. So it's an interesting idea about whether or not, but Anna has said in many cases that in many interviews that she's done that she doesn't always know what's going to happen. Sometimes she doesn't know what's going to happen until Evelyn tells her in the moment what's going to happen. Now, that being the case, it is certainly an interesting, you know, it was compelling. I mean, I was tuning in primarily to see what happened in that moment. I was tuning in primarily to see what happens. Does Evelyn come back? What choice does she make? I've thrown out my theories in the last episode. Is she going to bring back her father? Is she going to offer the resurrection power to Simon? Is she going to come back as a construct? Is she going to come back as a human? Now I have to wait to the beginning of the season for this, and it's the entire reason why we brought Omen on to guest star in the first place, and we didn't get to it. Tacky. Or, you know, whatever. Anyway, I'm irked. You can tell I'm irked. It was still a good episode. We still got some good drama, but the pacing irked. I will tell you what and we'll talk about, you know, what I thought worked, because every good season of D&D, every good adventure at the end of like an all-day session. I don't know if you guys have ever done that. That's like a family thing that we do. We get together, my brother and I, or my best friends and I, and we'll play all day long. Like, we'll get together at 12 and we'll play from like 12 to midnight. Although the older we get, the less that's starting to happen. Let me tell you. Excuse me. Sorry, it's allergy season and I'm allergic to not getting resurrections that I want. So anyway, that being said, we play all day long, and we don't make it to quite to midnight like we used to. But you know, pacing is important during those times. And every D&D long day session and every huge campaign or tier of play or whatever needs to end with a freaking huge battle. Needs to end with an epic confrontation where every spell and or daily power and whatever, and in the kitchen sink an alchemical vial of acid and crack and weed, and everything gets smoked and thrown in, and boom. I mean, every good D&D session needs to end with a huge fight. At least that's how I feel. That's how I and my groups play, and I love it. I've told you before, there's a huge munchkin in me, that needs it. You know, I hunger for it. So anyway, that being the case, I thought that the battle just worked great. Before we talk any more about that, I want to talk to you a little bit about another thing that I thought worked, and that was the conflict between Omen and Diath. I think if we'd thought about it, we would have realized it was inevitable. Diath thinks of himself as Strix's protector, and he certainly thinks of himself or behaves as though he were the party dad. I've talked about that before. Diath is dad, right? So I've talked about that before, and so the idea that Omen pops up, and Omen has manipulated and used and traumatized Strix. Of course, Diath is going to lose his shiz over that. Of course, he is going to, threaten Omen, posture, and plus, he's a guy, okay? Not every guy is like that, but you gotta step it up, okay? The thing is, Jared, bro, you got worked. He had Omen. I've watched the Acquisition Incorporated games, and I've loved them. There are things in them that I don't like as much. I didn't enjoy Scott Kurtz. I don't know why everybody thought Binwin was so great. I didn't think Scott Kurtz was either funny. I just thought he was crass. And I didn't think Binwin was interesting. I thought he was a stereotypical dwarf. Hey Swan Dive, how are you doing? Thanks for popping in. Oh, you're playing D&D tonight too. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm playing D&D tonight too. Well, that's okay, buddy. So he can watch it tomorrow. Yeah, always good to see you, Swan Dive. Thanks for popping in, bro. It's good to see you. So anyway, I thought that worked quite a bit. Omen punking him left and right. It made me giggle. The conflict between the two. He got clown. First time he got clown. When Omen says, my suspicion, having only been with him as a while, is that he doesn't keep up with a lot. I was like, oh, burn! So we have a sick burn there, and then Strix turns into rats because here's the conflict between. And I loved it when Strix said, "It's my boss," because what else is Omen to her? He has a contract on her. He is her boss, But I hadn't contextualized that at that point yet, so I thought it was great. Anyway, it was really funny. But that being said, it was funny. And then he clowns up again. Diath's like, "She's not my girlfriend, no." And Paulton's like, "Well, it's a fair read, And I was like, oh, Omen calls him out on having a crush on Strix. And while their relationship seems more like master and handler, I think that Strix is really growing beyond that. I really do. I think that not only is Strix growing beyond that, I think she's going to start to resent really soon how controlling Diath is in the name of protecting her. Strix she's not really stable. She's not the kind of person who is capable at this point of managing too much on her own successfully. Yeah, 50 years in Barovia, she has been on her own. She's lived on her own, but has she lived well when she was on her own? Was she living in a healthy way? She needs her friends, and she's commenting on the fact that she needs her friends. So it's an interesting scenario altogether. Omen clowns, and then when Omen finally he goes, "Dorth, I owe her." I was like, oh, son, you going out like a punk. And I thought he humiliated Diath. And I thought, oh man, Jared tried to come up with snappy replies, but it's not Jared's strong suit. Dialogue is not Jared's strong suit. Dialogue on the fly is also not Jared's strong suit. I think what Jared does best in dice camera action is plan out his actions and formulate how Diath will react to things, but the verbalizing, the dialogue does not come to it naturally. And so it's interesting. I also like Jared does really good descriptions of Diath's combat, and I like that. When I think about Diath fighting and Jared describes it, I remember that he's a rogue. I forget that because he plays dad all the time. Maybe his personality is more akin to like a young priest, right? But he is a rogue, and I see it. I really see it in my mind's eye when Jared is describing the fight scenes. So anyway, but he got clowned. So there you go. I thought it was a great episode. The battle was fun. I really enjoyed. I thought the battle worked. It went on too long, but it was to be expected. The thing about D&D that is so fun is what spells can do to the combat scenario. And that is something that we kind of lost in 4th edition. And I play 4th edition right now because I'm not done. I bought all the books. I'm not done, okay? And I'm not going to be done. But the thing that we lost in 4th edition is we lost that spontaneity that spells can have to the game, You can do anything you want still, but the spells in D&D classically they've been so flexible. Like anything like casting a Featherfall and landing a dinosaur, like Jim Dark Magic does in Acquisitions Incorporated. He lands, the dinosaur, 18, I think is his name, and with a Featherfall spell, and he's on the back of the dinosaur and he's landing. And anyway, it's really cool. He lands a dinosaur in the middle of Port Nyanzaru or the jungle or whatever in Chult. And it's a cool moment. You don't get that in 4th edition as much. The utility powers don't lend themselves easily to that, because if you take a utility power that does something like that, you are not taking the interrupter utility power that gives you a +4 to AC, and everybody needs it if the game is combat heavy. So I loved it, the moment of fight when Evelyn of Shar casts fear and everybody starts running. I love that. And then it changes everything. When Omen uses Stone Shape, that is a great spell, by the way. Stone Shape, we have used that in my campaigns historically in all kinds of ways, to seal up a wall, to put a wall in front of a door, that people were running through, and then they have to blast their way through it or whatnot. So I loved watching. I thought the fight, and here's the interesting thing too. Magic still made a fight between 3rd and 10th level characters interesting. In the book Player's Options, Spells and Power, I don't have it anymore. I sold it. I wish I'd kept it. Had some really great ideas in it, but Poppy needed some cash, okay? That was back when I was in college, and I was like, I need money more than I need this book that I don't have even a group to play with right now. So Player's Options, Spells, and Magic, the beginning of it has a description about the difference between fantasy and sci-fi. And maybe it was Steve Winter or Jim Lauder, I don't know who wrote the beginning of it, Wizards employee. He said that the difference between fantasy and sci-fi is magic. He said Star Wars is not a sci-fi, it's a fantasy because of the Force. It's magic. It's a magic system. It may not be arcana, but it's a system of magic. And I agree with him. Fantasy does have that magic element. It's why it draws some of us. The idea of the fantastic, of mystical power, it draws some of us in. So anyway, that being said, I loved the battle. I loved... I'm sorry Paulton didn't get to counterspell. It's layers upon layers of strategy. But I loved when Evil Paulton casts Crown of Madness and everyone panicked for a minute, because wouldn't that have been really cool, watching Strix go T-Rex on the whole party under a charm spell. That would have been interesting. And then I was really eager to see Evelyn of Shar in action. I'm glad Paulton got away. Evil Paulton got away. I'm not sure what happens to the Awful Crew from here. I don't know. What I suspect is going to happen is I suspect that the Hags will clone higher level duplicates. The Hags said these clones didn't turn out very well, and I think they were referring to the level. I think they were inferior clones. When you cast the clone spell, it produces a clone of your level. And so, that being said, these they were awful. So maybe the next Awful Crew will have a different name. I don't know. But also, Evil Paulton will surely advance from this and other encounters, right? So there'll be new clones, and Evil Paulton will come back. Who knows? Evelyn of Shar, surely someone will put her back together, put her pieces back together. It'll be interesting, but I think we'll run into the Awful Crew again. I would bet my bottom bum that Chris has an episode already planned for next season with the Awful Crew and a way to tie them in specifically. I don't know if you guys have watched, but it's definitely worth a watch. I would get online and watch Chris's discussion about the wrapping up of this season and his plans for the next season. And that kind of takes us into down the rabbit hole. So wandering down the rabbit hole, Chris said that he's going to take them out of their comfort zone, out of the areas where they are very, very comfortable, or things or places that they're doing. Now, how would you do that? The Waffle Crew has been to Ravenloft. They've been all over the realms. They've been on, they've been in Port Nyanzaru. Chult is just about as exotic as the Forgotten Realms gets. So where is he going to take them? Well, my thought, and I'm sure most of you are also thinking too, that he is going to wind up taking them to the plains. I wonder if he has more planned with the Lorcatha and the Skizzics and them finding out about their history. I don't know what that looks like. I'm sure Chris has an idea of what that looks like. My thought is Diath needs a contact of some kind who can tell him more about the Lorcatha, who is not an evil demon piece of poo, okay? All of their contacts are pieces of poo. They need to find someone virtuous, okay? DF needs an angel contact. So I don't think Chris watches, like I said previously. He doesn't have time, and it may not interest him. But I think that, if Chris were to listening, I would say he needs an angel contact of some kind. Some angel who can give him a mission, who can send them out maybe to recover artifacts of the Lorcatha so DF can reclaim his birthright. Maybe to find out about the Skizzics. Who are these families? Supposedly if the Hibbity Dibbity have, or whatever, he and Strix will undo the multiverse, which, I'm not buying it. Not for 2 seconds, not understanding the history of D&D and the cosmology and how it came about. So it's interesting. One of the things that talks about the origin of the current multiverse is the book, I think it's called Devils of the Nine Hells. It's a 2nd edition book, I believe. Really interesting. Talks about the origin of Asmodeus. Now, we get a 4th edition origin of Asmodeus that is very interesting. Talks about how he was the top angel of the god of humans. There's no god of humans, right? There's a god of elves, Corellin. There's a god of halflings, Yandala. There's a god of dwarves, Moradin. There's a god of, Yanti, Set or Seth or Sisith or whatnot. So there are, these gods that are progenitor deities, but there's no progenitor deity of the humans. And that deity, in the 4th edition, the reason they say there is none is because he was murdered. Supposedly, Asmodeus murdered him. And the reason being because he was in the Dawn War and he was an ineffectual, weak power, and he wouldn't engage in the Dawn War or the war against the demons. I don't remember which war it was. I can find it later. But he wouldn't engage in this war. And so Asmodeus got sick of it. Asmodeus was also fighting the demons and became corrupted by the evil he was constantly fighting. And he killed he who was. That's all they call it. So that's the 3rd edition. The 4th edition. The 2nd, 3rd edition description of Asmodeus is a whole lot more realm-centric. So there is a Coatl, the feathered serpents. Coatl comes from Mexican mythology. The feathered serpents are these huge celestial planar beings. They're lawful good beings. The Coatls, there are an interesting lawful good society because they're a meritocracy, achievement, and constantly trying to outdo each other and whatnot, even though they're lawful good. So that being said, the Coatls, they have a god named Jezerian. And according to that 2nd edition mythology, Asmodeus was never a fallen angel. He was always a god. And not only that, he was one of the most powerful gods. He was kind of a god of the multiverse. And so according to the mythology, Asmodeus and Jezerian were moving in an ever winding circle, biting the end of each other's tails, right? And when they broke apart, supposedly, for whatever reason it says they broke apart, war, whatnot in the heavens, they broke apart and it shattered the Outlands into, the multi-different planes that we have today. We got Limbo, Pandemonium, we got all these different, whatever. Asmodeus used to have the whole power of the planes, as did Jezerian, and he lost that power, and when they separated, Asmodeus was struck a blow and he fell. So he didn't fall because he was an angel that the gods had punished. That's 4th edition. In 2nd edition, Asmodeus was already beyond a greater god, and he fell when that union with Jezerian was broken. And Asmodeus hits he falls down into the 9 hells, and he's had bleeding wounds, and when those wounds have healed, supposedly Asmodeus will rise out of the 9 hells and free himself, and when he's all healed from that fall. So it's interesting. Until that time, Asmodeus' plan is to reshape the multiverse according to his image and his whim, his desire. And one of the ways he does that, it's late, and also I have D&D to get to, right? But one of the ways that Asmodeus does that is through the destruction of faith. Now remember, the faithless go to the wall around the city of the dead in Forgotten Realms. But a lot of the faithless wind up in the 9 hells, according to this cosmology, right? And so Asmodeus' goal is always to destroy faith more and more and more. That's one of the reasons why he makes deals. One of his agents of doing that is in Sigil, the Aethar. The Aethar are a society of people who deny the divinity of the gods. Not that they exist, not that they have power, but deny their divinity. And so Asmodeus supposedly supports the Aethar on the sly, and he supports other groups that destroy faith in the gods. And so that's one of his long-term plans, is to destroy faith across the multiverse and the gods through these different organizations until he gets to the point where faith is so weak in the multiverse that he can rise up and challenge the gods and destroy them. Now, I'm sure that there are other parts that have to be done. You got to take out the demons unless he turns them to his cause, or whatnot. So it's an interesting cosmology idea behind it. So because of all that, I'm not really buying that the Skizzics and the Lorcatha are going to undo the universe or the multiverse or all the planes or all the gods and the cheese lords and the archfey and the whatever. So I am curious though. Now moving on, where do I see the next season going? I do think that we are going to get some Lorcatha and Skizzics lore. I'm hoping, for the sake of Diath and Strix, that it becomes central to their goals of their campaign. There's too much in the next season that is still hanging over them from this season. They have a deal with Shemeshka, and he may have broken the Geese spell that he was under, but he's broken it, and now what? Okay, so he's broken the Geese, and that doesn't mean Shemeshka is going to go away. That also doesn't mean Shemeshka doesn't have plans. Shemeshka was there when the compact between the Skizzics and the Lorcatha was signed, and a fragment of Diath's soul was the bargaining chip, right? So supposedly Shemeshka has a fragment. Maybe he wants the whole thing, Maybe he wants to clone Diath, or she or it, whatever. It's an Arcanoloth, so it's an it. Chris said that anyway. So I don't know. Where else would they go that would take them out of their comfort zone? I don't know. I do think that they'll wander back into Barovia, because the reality is that Strahd is free. Okay? They've lost possession of the doll, and there's far too much to be gained by freeing Strahd, a Dark Lord, from the doll than there is otherwise. Now, whoever frees Strahd from the doll, Strahd is going to owe them a huge favor. And the Master of Ravenloft may be many things, but he's not a liar. And so if the deal is, I'll let you out if you will do such and such for me, that could go 100 different evil ways. But they're going to run into Strahd again. I don't know if it's going to happen in the next season, but that has to happen. They lost control of the stupid Drist. They lost control of the doll. Somebody found it in that dwarven city. What is it? I can't remember what it's called. The Drow took up residence there in Ari Salvador's books. Whatever. Some underground dwarven city that Drizzt takes it to, and somebody found it, or somebody got it away from him. I don't know who. We don't really know how it happened. So. That being said, Strahd, I think, is going to pop up. The Lorcatha and Skizzic lore is going to pop up. Shemeshka and Mr. Fox is going to pop up. But it's no holds barred here, because I don't know what their next adventure book is planned. The adventure books that Wizards has been putting out for 5th edition are real quality products. I mean, they're great. If you've not looked through them, I would never run one of those adventures myself, because I'm too much the dungeon master and I want to write my own saga. But I would steal, beg, borrow, and plead, right? I would take everything. One of the things we say in education is you're only as good as the lesson plans you steal, right? So anyway, it's interesting. Some of the NPCs fleshed out are really good. I'll steal names from one of those books. So who knows? I have no idea. I think it'll be really interesting. But those are the two areas, or the several areas, that I see us exploring. There are loose ends to tie up. I want to see more of the Awful Crew. I want to see more of the Sohn sisters. I don't think that's going to come right away, though. They're going to need time to make the clones, and then there's going to need to be a reason why the Awful Crew comes seeking them, unless it's to replace them. That would be interesting. Now, I've said before, I think it'd be definitely worth its own stream to watch the Awful Crew go off and be evil. To have their own focus. Maybe they work for Strahd. Maybe it's Strahd and the Awful Crew. Okay, Strahd and the Awful Crew. Wouldn't that be terrible? Welcome back to Barovia. There are evil versions of you out there trying to thwart you and creating or undoing all the good that you've done. Boy, wouldn't that be an interesting thing to do. Maybe that's the kind of thing Nate's going to do on Dark and Dicey. We also still have what happens with Simon. There's only one scroll of resurrection. That said, Omen can cast Raise Dead. So maybe the scroll for Evelyn and the spell Raise Dead for Simon. I don't know. I think Simon's had his day. I don't know. Also, Simon's going to come back with a mouth, but that we didn't really get to explore that too. And I know that Pris probably had things planned for Simon with a mouth. The mouth is just the beginning. Eventually he's a real boy. So I'm sure that's what Chris was intending all along. Simon becomes, a real boy. Maybe picks up a character class. It comes time for Paulton to find him a good home. That'd be a semi-interesting role play, right? Paulton doesn't want his kid to be like him, and we've heard Paulton say that before. Don't be like me. Also, an interesting thing, we get a lot more. We got a lot of jokes from Nate. Nate's really he's heavy in on the comedy. I think maybe he thinks that's where his niche is. I mean, Paulton's always been funny. He's always been a comedian, but he's really coming on strong now. He made some funny jokes in there. I don't know if I have any of them written down for my notes. I don't see anything in my notes for that. Now, I do still have another question pertaining to Evelyn's resurrection. Where is her mother? Where is her mother? Because I'm wondering if Evelyn's mother did not go over to Shar when her husband died, and she created Evelyn of Shar. Boom! Okay, I don't know, right? I have no idea. I don't know if Anna knows. But my brain is racing in 100 different directions. There have been too many references to Evelyn's mother that we don't know where she is. We don't know what happened to her. Evelyn obviously doesn't have a very close relationship with her. She's dead. She's out of her life. I don't know. And then there's the matter of Evelyn's order that we have to wrap up. Is that going to happen? Are we going to go into the Order of Aster, the Order of Lathander's Paladins, and find out where the corruption is? Zares alluded to that. So we've got a lot of different branches that we could go in. We could go Strahd and the Doll. We could go Evelyn's Order of Aster. We could go Skizix and Lorkatha. We could go Awful Crew and the Stone Sisters. We've got all these branches to go, and maybe Chris's intention is to bring all of them together. I don't know. And maybe his intention is to go in 100 other different directions that we haven't even predicted yet. Maybe Chris knows about the product that's coming out next, and he's going to take them through. The whole reason we have this stream is because they wanted to run people through the products it was doing. It was a sales pitch, in essence. And look what we got out of it, right? So it's something to be grateful for. Anyway. It's interesting stuff. I'm curious. I'm really excited for it to go forward. I'm also excited to have a week off. I'm enjoying doing the Waffle Press, but I'll probably take a week off, and that's okay, and start back up once we have episode 1. If you've not caught up on Trapped in the Birdcage, it's funny. It's starting to gain traction. If we move on to bird droppings briefly to finish up here, Trapped in the Birdcage, they are working on behalf of these were-ravens, and it seems like there's this rat problem in the city, but it's much bigger than anybody knew. There's like were-rats and cranial rats and whatever. So I wonder if it's going to turn out to be a big clan war between the were-ravens, who are good lycanthropes, and the were-rats, who are traditionally evil lycanthropes. But that seems to be where the story is shaping up. So I am curious for Trapped in the Birdcage to see where that happens. It's interesting. Anna's character, Wilhelmine, is fairly shallow in this. I don't think that she's found a depth yet to her character. And there's nothing wrong with having a shallow character, except that eventually even the shallow character's world gets rocked. And there has to be backstory for that character to get rocked. I'm curious in Trapped in the Birdcage now to see what it is that is going to be in the past of these characters. Nejma, the wizard, who is my favorite, she is hilarious. If you've not tuned in to Trapped in the Birdcage, Nejma, with her constant, air of superiority. In the last episode, they were on their way to this formal event, and Nejma was trying to use Mage Hand to gather a bouquet of flowers, but she says Nejma's really a terrible wizard, so she ends up ripping all these roses off the wall, and and she's like, oh, well, so anyway, it's really funny. Interesting boo. Jimmy Wetzel was playing Saturn, which I still think sounds like a stripper name, but Jimmy, which he probably likes, but Jimmy Wenzel, who's playing Saturn, is kind of watching Evelyn's character and Anna for clues on how to play, and it's fun watching him realize, oh, you can do this in D&D. Oh, you can do this in oh, this is so fun, and so the two of them are kind of gal pals, I guess you would say. It's funny to watch them together. Anna does something, then Jimmy does it, or whatnot, and then Nejma's kind of on the fringe, doing her thing and being hilarious, and then there's Reader's lawful good, and the dynamic between them, I think, could be interesting, because you have Anna's character, Wilhelmine, and Saturn, who are pretty disreputable people. They're thieves, they're criminals, they're only working for the Were-Ravens because they got pulled into Sigil, right? And then we have, a lot of other things, too. We've got the dynamic between them. Nejma seems to be somewhat neutral. And Reader, who is the Warforged, who was literally born yesterday, he is lawful good. And he keeps being traumatized by the crimes that he sees he sees Wilhelmine, doing. It's interesting. He needs to develop his role play more, that player. But Reader has so much potential, and he is starting to drop comments and dive into it. So I'm curious to see where this goes. I didn't see the whole wrestling episode yet. I haven't finished watching it. I'll probably pop in, do some more bird droppings in my next episode. Trapped in the Birdcage is still going on. It's a good show. Holly's putting on a good show. The dynamic is very different from Dice Camera Actions, but it's still very interesting, and it's definitely worth watching. So if you have not tuned in to Trapped in the Birdcage, do it. Now, I will also tell you, I just recently started with Sirens of the Realms, which is the most fascinating train wreck on wheels that I think I've ever seen on a D&D stream. Satine Phoenix has referred several times to the fact that she has brain damage, and yet she's DMing. But what she has set up is kind of an interesting thing. It's the kind of D&D that I used to call girl D&D. So I apologize if that offends anybody. This was a much younger stage of sorcery. And so anyway, it was interesting. I actually put that on the Wizard forums once. I said that, in girl D&D there is no combat, and they struck my comment out of the forums because it was misogynist. But like I said, that was a much younger me. So anyway, interesting. Sirens of the Realms is all female, and it has a characteristic and a quality to it that the other streams don't have. They are actually performing, and it was fun. It was so interesting watching those first couple episodes, watching them perform. There was a bardic competition, and they actually performed the song that they sang in it, played instruments, and it was cool, you guys. So I haven't really caught up. I just started Sirens of the Realms, but I have been brought in by the live music. They're all a level of bard, and Chris was laughing when he was talking about it on a YouTube video, because the idea of all bards, or of everybody having levels of bard was inadvisable, he said, for the Tomb of Annihilation, and he's 100% right on that one, right? Tomb of Annihilation is like, you better have a healer, you better have a tank, and you better have a wizard and a cleric, and yada yada, and you certainly better have a rogue for all those traps. Tomb of Annihilation, I feel like, is an adventure that in its concluding stages really requires a balanced party. So these bards do not, I don't know what's going to happen, but their experience in Chult has been largely different, and it's funny, they ran into a band called Magic Missile, and one of the members had history with the lead singer, and so she fell to pieces around him. She was like, I don't even care about you. and it was hilarious. And so, I don't know. I thought it was great. I think it's worth a watch. I don't think I'm going to start a Sirens of the Realms thing, segment, but I recommend checking it out. It's not quite the quality of Dice Camera Action or even Trapped in the Birdcage, but and Satine Phoenix kind of she does her own rules for the facility of what she is able to cognitively keep up with, which I think is 100% fine and awesome, because the game should always be what works for the group. So anyway, check it out. Check out Trapped in the Birdcage. I'm really excited for Dice Camera Action to start up again. I'll probably won't do an episode in the week that we're off in between, but I'm excited to hear your comments. If you have anything to say, go ahead and leave a comment on my YouTube channel. It's Sage of Sorcery on YouTube. And you can also follow me on Twitter if you'd like. I don't post a ton, but I do announce the streams and talk a little bit about that. I'll react to the episodes occasionally. I'm at Sage of Sorcery 1, and that's my Twitter handle. You are also... I haven't started uploading these to Twitch yet because, keeping everybody on YouTube is kind of cool, but I'll probably start doing that for the facility of those that want to watch it on Twitch. But anyway, that being said, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Holly, for the good show that you put on. Another really good season. We love Dice Camera Action, and we have affection. I wouldn't say I love the players because I don't know them yet, but I do have. I love them. We have affection for them. So thank you to all those of you who are watching my YouTube videos. I love interacting with you. I like getting your comments. It's what makes this community so great. The interactions that we have with each other. I can't paint. I don't do artwork. I can't do that. This is my artwork, right? So enjoy it, and I will see you next time. So until then, remember, there are more of us now than there are of them. Have a great weekend.